Man, gaming has been stacked recently. Ebola Village,
What the fuck? Shooing away a fart, dude? Did that guy fart?
the world's first BRPG, Medieval Doom, Skyrim 2. And so I thought, what better time to talk about Minecraft?
Warning. This video contains numerous references and images of male genitalia for some reason. Viewer discretion is advised.
Artistic expression and the plain old ability to build are two of those things that humans hold over every other species in the animal kingdom. It's not exclusive to people, of course, but we're still so very far ahead of the others. And if there's one thing that our modern society is good at, it's commercializing our instincts, in this case turning creativity into product. Even this most earnest drive of wanting to drag a stick through the sand to make an erect ding-a-ling can be put on a physical or digital shelf and be sold. That's why it should come as no surprise that there are video games dedicated to this sort of thing. Enter Minecraft. Minecraft has achieved incredible popularity as the best-selling game of all time. Some reasons contributing to its legendary status is probably because of its mostly colorful and family-friendly nature, its simplistic, easy-to-understand gameplay, its availability on almost every modern platform, and of course, its recognizable, blocky, and pixelated graphics. All of these factors means that Minecraft is highly marketable and has the tendency to attract those of the childish persuasion. And let me tell you, some of these youngins tend to be very memeable.
Recommended amount of detonated wham I should have to.
As an extremely dignified gamer with refined tastes, it's really easy for me to look down at Minecraft from my ivory tower of games made for the sophisticated intellectual and scoff. A dignified and sophisticated scoff, of course. But although Minecraft is a popular children's game, it's not a game that can only be enjoyed by children. I think there's another reason why Minecraft is so popular, and that's because the game is actually quite good. In an industry where most notable games involve dealing damage, death, and destruction, Minecraft stands out by placing creativity at the center of its gameplay. Of course, it too has death and destruction in spades, but that's only a fraction of the appeal. One of the highlights of its gameplay is building whatever the hell you want. Unlike most games that offer a set progression path or predefined challenges, Minecraft gives players the tools to build, modify, and shape the world as they see fit. Constructing massive cities, designing complex redstone contraptions, you name it. Players have the ability to actively produce their own content. This emphasis on creative freedom makes Minecraft different from traditional game design, which have clear, set goals and tightly structured progression. Instead of guiding players through a curated sequence of challenges, Minecraft hands you a sandbox and says, do whatever you want. There's no predefined victory condition, no final boss or ending cutscene to chase. Well, there is sort of a final boss, but I'll get to that later. The reward Minecraft most often draws out of you is intrinsic, the joy of building and shaping the world according to your own whims. That open-endedness fosters a kind of play that feels personal and not prescribed. Other games that involve building mostly only allow you to create prefabricated buildings or have much stricter structural limitations that dictate size and placement. In contrast, Minecraft gives players complete control over each and every individual block, with little restriction on where they can place them, allowing for intricate designs and architecture, in places as stupid as way high up in the sky or even underwater. All of this from a first-person perspective on a 3D grid. The game invites experimentation and rewards imagination, not through realism, but through systems that are approachable, flexible, and surprisingly expressive. That's why, even after all these years and numerous clones, Minecraft remains uniquely compelling. Not because it simulates construction most accurately, but because its accessibility allows players to build from their imagination without needing a manual. This fine-grained control over building has the ability to grant player an amount of care and attachment for their creations unattainable through more broad means in other video games that feature building. For example, I care far more for this ugly-ass piece of shit city than I do any of the creations I've made in any other game. all because my friends, family, and I have built up each and every building block by block. Minecraft is as close as a 3D video game with mechanics can get to a set of Lego blocks combined with a beginner's electronics kit. I suppose the next step along the way is opening up Blender and making a block and balls, but learning a program as advanced as 3D modeling software isn't quite so accessible as a bright and colorful video game. I'd much rather have our future generations enjoying such a solid, creativity-fostering game than the 20th or further installment of FIFA or whatever, or something else that's popular among the kids these days. That's why if you asked me if I think kids should play Minecraft, I'd give you a triple thumbs up. I've been generally speaking about the creative mode of Minecraft and not the survival mode, which is the one I really want to get into. At certain points when it shines, Minecraft Survival has to be unironically one of the most immersive games I have ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Yes, seriously, right up there with Half-Life and my favorite game ever, Dark Souls, and in some very specific scenarios, even more so than either of those two. Of course, what people think of as immersive is subjective, and different folks will find different kinds of games immersive. For some, all it takes is a good story and good graphics, but for me, it's the kind of gameplay that keeps me in the zone, which Minecraft does very well to an extent. When the stars align, which in this case is Minecraft's early game, you're encouraged to explore the depths of Minecraft's caves. Since you're basically defenseless and have trash gear, every step you take down there is treacherous. You're asked to defend yourself from or avoid monsters while mining valuable ores. And the more good items you gather, the more scary the thought of dying becomes. The threat of losing all your good shit pushes you to take cautionary steps that you wouldn't take in games where you're an unkillable powerhouse. Sometimes that means carefully funneling monsters into choke points to pick them off one by one. Sometimes that means barricading off incoming enemies so you can eat to regain hearts. And sometimes that means just outright running the fuck away from a basically unkillable mob. And although Minecraft's combat isn't really anything to write home about, its use in tandem with degradable gear, slow health recovery, along with the fact that you can lose all your items or straight up your entire save if you're on hardcore, meaning that every fight you choose to engage in, you want to milk every last drop of optimization out of, getting crits, blocking every hit you can with your shield, sniping enemies from far away, or even just some good old exploitation of AI behavior. Basically, the difficulty in the early game of Minecraft Survival encourages you to engage in combat at its peak, which is really, really cool. In one of my previous videos, I touched upon how narrative-based games, and specifically cutscenes or walking sections, can hold back a game's engagement and replayability factors. If you're not completely drawn into the story, that same problem can also mess with your immersion. Half-Life 1 is one of the best games ever made, and part of the reason why that is because it's super immersive. And that aspect holds up extremely well even to this day. If you exclude the brief loading sections, most of Half-Life is a seamless gameplay experience, with close to zero interruptions in gameplay. The developers clearly envisioned whatever the first-person video game equivalent is to a one-shot film. However, the beginning of the game quite literally railroads you for half the time and bars you from progressing until the scripted sequences play out. Essentially, the real game doesn't begin until a while later after the game forces you to participate in, or in my case, spaz out to. Even if the narrative for a majority of the game is minimized to an extreme, that one part in the beginning has kept me from replaying it on more than one occasion. And if I had a nickel for every time a modern game ran away from me, either through an unskippable cutscene, or walking segment, or some other narrative trap, I'd have about $5. Minecraft, on the other hand, has absolutely none of that. Instead, it drops you off at the playground and forgets to pick you up when the sun goes down. Of course, that's helped by the fact that Minecraft is a game that doesn't really feature any sort of narrative, or at least not a concrete one. This means that any narratives told through the game are all purely emergent, player-driven ones. And if you ask me, that's something really special that only video games can pull off. One of the moments where the game took me by surprise was when I finished an incredibly long cave dive, which took me what seemed like 1,000 blocks away from my home base. I was dangerously low on food and had an inventory full of valuable materials, and any stray creeper or skeleton that happened to spawn under the shade of some dark corner could vaporize me. threatening to erase all the progress I've built up over the course of the last couple hours. And then, seconds after resurfacing, this little moment happened. This gentle, quiet moment hit me harder than most games ever could. It actually kind of astonished me, made me stop to appreciate the blocky landscape around me. I was made to feel somehow both unsafe and peaceful. It was a moment both beautiful and fleeting. In my opinion, this type of moment is when Minecraft shines the brightest. Maybe the player just raided the ancient city and had an inventory full of valuable loot, but then accidentally set off a bunch of shriekers at the same time, causing the warden to spawn. Maybe the player stumbled across a trial chamber while caving without knowing what the hell it was, learned how the keys work on the fly, and then came out of it with super good items. It doesn't even have to be big moments like those. Small moments like stumbling across a cozy little village and deciding to spend the night, or finding a dog and adopting it, keeping it in its own little house outside. These types of emergent moments are examples of why video games are so special to me. None of this stuff happened through a cutscene or unskippable walking section. The important part is that it happened to me, and not some character in a story. I felt the tension and then the sense of accomplishment that came after surviving, and it could only have been achieved through me engaging with the game. It goes without saying that a lack of traditional narrative does not automatically equate to immersion. Plenty of story-based games have the ability to grip you through their visuals or story. But if it's your first experience with the game, from the very moment you click on your world, Minecraft trusts that you will learn to gather resources like food and tools, build a shelter, and make a bed to sleep in. And if you fail to do that, you'll just die or lose all your items. Even if you have in-game tutorials turned on, the game in no way treats you like a baby or does anything that slows gameplay down to a crawl. This uncompromising dedication to uninterrupted gameplay, combined with a complete absence of hand-holdy, railroady, walkie-talkie sections, really helps to solidify that you are in this world. This sort of in media res approach Minecraft takes is much more commonly associated with ancient-ass games. It was surprising to me the first time I experienced the game, especially coming from a game marketed so heavily towards children. I can't speak for the Java edition of the game, but in the Bedrock version... I know. In the Bedrock version, if you go into the start menu and look deep enough, there are somewhat lengthy tutorials about what some of the mechanics are and whatnot, but they really don't get into the nitty-gritty. And I guarantee you a huge number of players will forego this or just not even notice it entirely. That's why I think this hands-off approach is a welcome departure from many other popular games. This design decision alone puts Minecraft a tier above most of those other games, at least for me. Of course, other than its redstone stuff, Minecraft doesn't really have super incredible combat or mechanics leagues above the rest of many other games, but it does have unique ones. And just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's devoid of more advanced skill-based moves. I'm kind of an outsider/boomer when it comes to all things Minecraft, especially its PvP, so you'll have to forgive me if I don't know the names of these weird advanced techniques players do in PvP. Some of the shit these kids pull off is genuinely impressive in an intact chastity sort of way. Sweaty players placing blocks to strategically space away opponents in neutral or to platform off of or to break fall damage with is actually quite impressive to watch. Quickly organizing and switching back and forth between different items in the inventory screen and on the hotbar takes its own amount of skill. That being said, I have enough trouble getting laid as it is, so I try to distance myself from this grassless shit as much as possible.
Dream! Oh! Dream! Hello, Dream, it's me!
Plus, the PvE in survival, which I assume is the main mode, doesn't require this kind of skill, or at least not nearly to the same degree that sweaty PvP games are. At its core, Minecraft is about mining and then crafting, and then building and then surviving. But it could also be so much more thanks to its non-traditional, semi-non-linear freeform gameplay. Because the game is so open-ended, there is no single clear goal in Minecraft, and if you're looking at the game through the lens of a more linear experience, it pans out largely the same way. With the exception of several key items you need to gather to progress through the Nether and the End, there is no set, clear path through progression. There are several ways you can get to mid-game in Minecraft. You could do it the old-fashioned way, caving and mining until you find enough diamond to make diamond gear. You could barter with villagers to get diamond gear. You could look through an ancient city or some other place to find diamond gear. But this can either work for or against the game. Like every other game in existence, survival Minecraft is not without its flaws. And there are many of them, most of which stem from its aforementioned open-endedness. This open-endedness isn't confined to its progression. It also extends to its level design or complete lack thereof. Minecraft is an open-world game thanks to its nearly unlimited world generation. This means that assuming you don't copy a seed, every world you generate will be a completely unique, never-before-seen world. Mostly, this works perfectly fine, or even superbly, I would go so far as to say. I can't think of another game that does it as well as Minecraft. The world generation creates some beautiful, breathtaking rolling hills and deep, ominous caves that really seem like it's naturally made. How organic the world feels really helps to drive home that the world you generated has existed for an incomprehensible number of years and has its own ecosystem, and will continue to exist for another millennia with or without your input. However, the open world aspect can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can be very exhilarating coming across an ancient biome or structure that feels like a secret even the game has forgotten. For example, a while back I knew something called the Deep Dark existed, but I had no idea what it entailed or even what it looked like. And when I happened to go caving under a mountain, I started shitting my diapers seeing Skulk and hearing mysterious music. Eventually, I alerted and spawned the warden and then died to it, but it was crazy cool that you can just stumble across this stuff. But on the other hand, the open world aspect can be just a flat out pain in the ass. On paper, exploring a huge, almost unlimited world sounds synonymous with adventure, but in reality, structures are so far apart and obscure to get to, it just gets boring traversing between them and your home base. You could make a nether portal nearby important structures to speed up traversal to your home base, but it's still a pain in the ass to set up. And sometimes certain biomes or generated structures just flat out don't work. For example, in the world that I gathered most of my footage in, the Eyes of Ender brought me thousands and thousands of blocks away to some shithole in bumfuck Australia or whatever, only to find out that there was no stronghold underground. I even went into creative mode and confirmed it. This pissed me off, so I ended up just using chunk base to find another stronghold nearest to me, which was like another how many thousands of blocks away. Another thing that Minecraft's open-endedness calls into question is whether or not there's an end goal in the game at all. You could argue that killing the Ender Dragon is the goal of the game since the credits roll, but no one who actually killed the Ender Dragon is convinced that Mojang intended for the experience to end there. In fact, the reward for beating the Ender Dragon and venturing into the end are shulker boxes and elytras. Two incredibly powerful, game-changing items that remove much of the restrictions of exploration and building. The fact that I'm even debating whether or not there even is an end goal in the game can be seen as a flaw in itself, but it would be unfair of me, or at least misguided of me, to judge Minecraft's quality in comparison to other, way more tight gameplay experiences with crystal clear goals, because the game isn't made to be that kind of experience. From an FPS perspective, Minecraft is trash. From a medieval battle simulator perspective, Minecraft is trash. Even from a pure survival perspective, Minecraft is trash. It's obvious that the game doesn't push the envelope too far in those areas. Minecraft works because it mashes together those things while adding onto it its signature building stuff. Building up whatever random design pops into your head while dealing with survival mechanics is in its own right very appealing. Turning your world from an inhospitable environment to a much more safe one is enjoyable. Watching your base slowly burgeon from a bare-bones hut to an impregnable fortress with every mechanical amenity you can imagine is a huge pleasure. Filling a once vacant and dangerous landscape with a bunch of stupid buildings from your imagination is downright fun. Like I said before, the biggest appeal of the game is building whatever you want. That, to me, is the early, late, and end game. However, the problem with my logic there is that if that were true, then the creative mode would be the main mode, and the survival elements would be worthless, or at least secondary to the creative mode. And there's certainly some truth to that. Many of the aspects of survival don't really mesh well with each other. I mean, it works, but not always smoothly. There's a bit of redundancy between mechanics, like how hunger exists but barely matters once you have a steady food source, or how there's a crossbow and trident, but really no point in using them since bows are 10 times easier to find or craft, or how there are mobs that provide zero utility, or how gold gear has the highest enchantability but is fucking worthless since it breaks so quickly. Progression in the game is absolutely fucked. Surviving in Minecraft survival can become a joke because you can become so powerful so easily that almost no PvE mobs, barring like 2, pose a threat to you. The devs of Civilization once said, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game, and Minecraft is no exception to this quote. The overworld contains the most examples of this. One of the most overlooked exhibits of this is the bed and the torch. So long as you have a steady source of wool and a fuel source, which is really only a matter of grinding, you can place down any number of beds and torches wherever you'd like, even in dangerous places like caves. If you're afraid of dying and losing all your gear, just place down a bed to set what is essentially a checkpoint, and that place will never have any sort of danger again. Beds and torches become obsolete with the Bethesda-esque ability to go into the pause menu and change the difficulty to easy or even peaceful once you see any hint of danger. And if you're fully decked out in heavily enchanted diamond or even netherite gear, which again is only a matter of grinding, it makes it so that you're essentially invincible when fighting most mobs. Death isn't really a threat. Even in super sticky situations, totems of undying in your offhand will give you more than enough time to unfuck yourself. So then maybe hardcore mode fixes things. And it does a little bit, by removing the ability to go into the menu and change your difficulty, and by adding a layer of tension with the threat of losing your world permanently. Unfortunately, with all the OP items still at your disposal, the only thing hardcore really does is heighten the tension when you're in the early game, and then it drops off super hard again when you get the good stuff. And just like every other difficulty, after you've reached a certain point in progression, death still just becomes a dream very far over the horizon. So all of this means that any realistic, common combat scenario can be bypassed with good gear and some other items. This means that real tension only exists for early to mid-game players, who simply just haven't had a good chance to grind out good gear yet. With the exception of the Ender Dragon, and that's assuming the player even intends to reach the credits, the player is almost never outright forced to engage in life or death situations. And all of this ultimately feeds and slowly funnels itself into the player's tendency to optimize everything. Minecraft survival should be called Minecraft Optimize Boring Chores, because like most games which involve searching for items and then crafting with them, the act of gathering items devolves into boring chores. Need stone for a bridge, grind out a whole quarry. Need meat for villager trading, grind out an unethical number of animals packed into a confined space. All this shit is boring, it takes no skill, and it takes forever. In other words, it's a waste of time. So it's not surprising that players will want to optimize the act of gathering such items. You can build semi to fully automatic farms for many important resources. Mob drops, XP, iron, trading halls, you name it. The addition of redstone means that if you have the know-how, you can even automate those to at least some small degree. Mojang even officially recognizes this sort of thing by not only including items meant to automate otherwise manual things, they also feature it in their YouTube videos. And since things like grinding mobs for XP or killing cows for leather, or gathering kelp or whatever isn't nearly stimulating enough to keep a player engaged in the long run, I'm perfectly fine with optimization and automation to that extent. The problem is when this optimization or automation extends to the gathering of items that actually require the player to dip their toes in at least some danger. Even with items that aren't really farmable, like diamonds and netherite, you can still optimize by going down to a certain depth and start strip mining. Doing so yields much better results than it does just exploring caves, but it comes at the cost of removing any challenge that might have come through caving or through exploring bastions. You could tell me that I just need to have a little restraint in order to make the game more challenging for myself, that I should just avoid making things easier and more streamlined for me to gather, and I'd agree with you to some extent. You can squeeze a number of hours out of the game or even a whole playthrough utilizing challenge runs. This is true for many games, not just Minecraft. In my Halo video, I largely restrict myself from using the battle rifle, one of the strongest weapons, if not the strongest weapon in the game. And I had a lot of fun from the challenge of limiting myself that way. But the fact that I even had to do that in order to have a more balanced and challenging experience means that the abundance and OP-ness of the battle rifle is a flaw in the game's design. As much as I stroke old Bungie's bungee cord, there's really no other way to spin it. Bungie themselves knew this, and outright scrapped the BR in ODST and Reach, and replaced it with other more balanced weapons. This means that the OP enchantments and gear and how easy they are to obtain and keep around is also a flaw in the game's design. And then there's also the possibility of mods which have the potential to fix this sort of problem. but personally, I don't like to drop however many dollars on a game made by a specific studio for other people to fix it. As with all forms of art, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some players might enjoy becoming nigh on invincible in Minecraft, but some people might just get bored. And I get the feeling that most players happen to be in the boat of the former rather than the latter, in which case I might be in the minority. So at the risk of sounding like a pretentious contrarian asshole, here's my 2 cents on this whole shebang. At a minimum, it shouldn't be up to the player or a modding community to make a game consistently engaging as a baseline experience. The reason why other more tightly designed games are so fun to play is because of precisely that. They're tightly designed. There might not be as much player freedom or as many toys to play with, but the relatively few mechanics that are in those games intermingle with each other efficiently and without fluff. For example, in Resident Evil 4, each element directly influences or complements the others. Guns, enemy behavior, hit reactions, and resource management are all deliberately interconnected, ensuring that almost every action related to combat has meaningful consequences or interactions. This kind of tightly woven design leaves little room for redundancy or extraneous mechanics. It keeps gameplay consistently engaging and purposeful from start to finish. The reason why Minecraft becomes boring for some players after a certain point is due to poor, loose design. While the game certainly has unparalleled creative freedom and an impressive variety of tools, blocks, and items to experiment with, many of these mechanics exist in isolation rather than as interconnected systems. And in the cases that they are connected with each other, they often trivialize gameplay rather than enriching it, e.g. OP enchantments, gear, farms, and other stuff. Without clearly defined goals or tightly woven interconnected systems, you'll eventually exhaust your internal motivation, because the game certainly isn't giving you any extrinsic challenge, or at least not enough. This makes the survival experience eventually feel aimless or repetitive, if not both. Though it might not seem like it at first, there is an art to restriction. Why would I bother being careful about falling and breaking every bone in my body if I can just enchant my gear with feather falling or drink a potion of slow falling? Why would I bother being cautious in a cave if I could just bring a bed and a stack or 2 of torches to make a safe checkpoint every time I see a group of enemies? Restricting these things forces the player into making meaningful decisions, or at a minimum forces them to engage with danger. When a game deliberately places limits on what you can and can't do, it helps to create tension and catharsis when the challenge it presents to you is overcome. Just like that little inspiring story I told you about in the beginning of the video. That kind of player-driven microstory is much more scarce to come across again after certain points in progression, when so many aspects of the game's combat elements can be trivialized. In this sense, restriction isn't just a limitation, but an essential component of compelling game design. Of course, I'm being reductive here, and there are many situations where the examples I gave don't apply. Plus, this is coming from the perspective of someone who probably overthinks video game mechanics way more than is healthy. I could give suggestions about how the game should be changed, that the overworld should be much smaller than they are now, or that items like beds and torches should only have their mechanical abilities above ground, or that caves should be a separate dimension like the Nether or the End, or that every time the player enters a dimension that isn't the overworld, it should be wiped clean for another brand new and smaller world gen every time they re-enter. But asking for all of that would be kind of like asking for another game entirely. I sincerely doubt that people play Minecraft for deep, complex mechanics or consistent, nerve-wracking gameplay experiences. They play it for the freedom and creativity that comes with punching trees and building castles, and that's perfectly valid. And what this means is that I am not Minecraft's target audience, and any discussion about balance or difficulty is going to hit a ceiling much lower than what more tightly designed games have. Minecraft was never designed to push back too hard, because it was designed to let you do whatever you want. That's its strength, but also its biggest limitation if you're looking for a game with more bite. And again, that's perfectly valid. Not every game will be for everyone. Or that's what I would say if I were a little bitch, and if Mojang themselves didn't seem like they at least knew this problem exists. They have already taken good, small to wide steps in this direction. Respawns in the Nether are limited to a specific and more expensive version of the bed. And while we're on the topic of the Nether, in order to upgrade your armor to Netherite now, you have to go to a bastion and find Netherite templates. For the End, you just straight up can't set respawn points. The Wither is a really cool boss fight that's much more difficult than the Ender Dragon in my opinion. The Deep Dark is a fantastic addition / change of pace to caving with unique puzzle-esque mechanics, whose fail state is to spawn a mob that is very deadly, and Trial Chambers are another great addition for those seeking a more traditional dungeon crawling experience. However, with the exception of the Nether and End stuff, the rest of those things still fall into the same trap. That is, the trap of optionality. Assuming that defeating the Ender Dragon is the endpoint of the game, you can go through the whole game without even stepping foot into the Deep Dark, a Trial Chamber, or fighting the Wither. Player-driven goals and tightly designed gameplay systems don't have to be mutually exclusive. Just because Minecraft excels in the free-form make-your-own-adventure department doesn't mean that the survival aspect has to suffer. There is an alternate dimension out there somewhere where players like me can have our cake and eat it too. There is common ground Mojang can find to create a more focused gameplay experience for Minecraft survival, and strengthen its identity as a result. I'm certain of it. It just hasn't been found yet. Maybe it's tweaks to certain things, the addition of certain things, or the outright removal of certain things. I don't know, but it's possible. I can feel it in my ass. Hardcore mode, or another mode like a super duper big dick hardcore mode I made up in my head just now, has huge potential to be the peak of the survival Minecraft experience. Not only is it a great option for crazy bastards to risk losing everything because of one mistake, it also has the potential to restrict the player's access to certain things while requiring the player to reach certain points in the game. In my ideal rainbows and sunshine Minecraft world, this super duper hardcore mode would outright delete the totem of undying from the game, or at least just restrict the player to just one of them per player at a time. It would also make certain changes to progression. For example, like how a diamond pickaxe is technically required to reach the Nether. Why not make it so that you have to raid an ancient city for those useless fucking echo shards to craft something required to even access a trial chamber? Why not make the ominous vault drop a guaranteed item that's required to craft a wither? Why not make a beacon only obtainable by defeating the wither a requirement to enter an end portal and finally defeat the Ender Dragon? If you ask me, that version of Minecraft would be a more fulfilling and engaging experience, and it would also be a win-win situation since the casual player would still have access to other difficulties which don't have those changes. I'm very well aware that if those changes would be put in the game, even if they were only limited to hardcore mode or some other mode, it would detract from Minecraft's signature open-endedness, which has captured so many players. Mojang has the difficult job of balancing their game to please the highest percentage of players, which happens to be the casual player. And although I rarely agree with that, I completely understand why they do it. It's the wider audience that keeps their boat afloat. Also, their parent company is Micropenis, and even though they claim to have taken a hands-off approach, behind closed doors I have almost no doubt that Microshaft execs pressured the big dogs at Mojang to aim their balanced trajectory towards the more casual side of things, if only to a small degree. Of course, that's speculation, but it's not baseless speculation. Soulless corporations always want to stick their finger in the billion-dollar pie. And I'll never forget how Microdong burned bridges with old Bungie and played a big role in ruining the Halo franchise. And even though I said all this stuff just now about Microchode, it doesn't mean I'll get what I want even if they were out of the picture. If Mojang were the sole developer and publisher and whatever else in a vacuum-tight seal, there would still be no guarantee that they'd take Minecraft down the path I want them to. After all, they too are a company, and they too have pockets to line with money. Although I'm doubtful about it, I still huff a ton of copium that Minecraft will someday be a game elevated above the rest, because it really has the potential. Minecraft is a, live service game. So it occasionally gets updated with new stuff, so I'll forever be on the lookout for what Mojang adds in this regard. And while we're on the live service note, I'd like to talk a little bit about that too. Since Minecraft is a live service game, it also brings with it a set of complications. A player who played Minecraft back in the alpha or beta stages had a super different experience than the Minecraft we know today. There are a ton of videos on YouTube that you can watch right now about this stuff. I myself only played the Xbox 360 version as a kid, so while I might have noticed distinct differences, it's not like I'm an OG or anything, so I can't really talk in too much detail about it. Personally, I don't really mind most of the updates and shit to the new versions of the game, but I can 10,000% understand why some players prefer old Minecraft to new Minecraft. Some YouTubers make some really great points about why old Minecraft is a stronger and tighter experience than new Minecraft. some of which I completely agree with and some of which coincide with my own issues about the game. I highly recommend you check out some of these videos if you're curious. But for me, debating the pros and cons of Minecraft's live serviceness, or even live service games as a whole, is another ballpark altogether, and most definitely requires its own video. For this video itself, live service is just a flat out negative, because it will render my complaints obsolete at some point when they're addressed, if they ever are. Plus, the Vibrant Visuals update came out after I was done getting most of the footage, so now this video looks a little disjointed. So for now, I'm satisfied with all the garbage I wrote out just now about Minecraft in its current state, and I think it's time to bring the video to a close. There is an air of permanence and intimacy in Minecraft survival that you don't get in most other games. Once you place down a singular block, it's there forever, or until some horrible disaster destroys it. You can mine a deep slate block all the way down at Y64 and bring it all the way back up to your base, go to sleep, get onto a boat, and bring that same block with you all the way through a tunnel you carved into a hill for easy access to another base, and then finally place it down for no other reason than just because you wanted to. You can build anything anywhere, customize it to your liking, and assign them with any mechanical function you want in an unlimited world with materials that you personally gathered with your own two weird blocky hands. Assuming you don't download someone else's world, each seed is unique, and no two world generations will ever be the same, meaning that your Minecraft world is truly your own, regardless of whether or not you place a single block down. And all of that stuff is unique, and very, very much worthy of praise. It means something when you invest time and effort into carving out and shaping your own space, especially in a world that doesn't tell you what to do. The sense of ownership and intimacy between player and world is unmistakable. That's the good shit right there. So while I might take a fat diarrhea dump on its systems and balance and how easily things can be broken, I still respect what it does better than almost any other game. It lets you shape an entire world that's completely yours to shape. It doesn't matter if you're building a huge mega base, a cock and balls, or a guy taking a shit, it all counts. Minecraft may not be the most tightly designed game, it may not punish you or push you in the way that other more focused games do, but it gives you the space and the landscape to carve out your own meaning, and sometimes that's more powerful than anything else. Thanks for sticking around. This has been